Look at this, not just in passing. Stop and let your eyes adjust. Because what's in front of you isn't a painting, it's a labyrinth. One where, for 500 years, art historians, theologians, psychoanalysts, and ordinary people who dared to look too closely have gotten lost. One of the first people to see it, the secretary to the Spanish Cardinal Antonio de Beatis, viewed this triptych in 1517 in the palace of Count Henry III in Brussels. In his diary, he wrote that he saw various strange things: seas, skies, forests, fields, and many other things. But when he tried to describe the details, he simply ran out of words. He wrote, "Things so pleasing and fantastical that no one who hasn't seen them could ever describe them." This is The Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch, a triptych that has refused to be understood from the moment it was made. Let's try to figure out how it works. What do we know? Let's start with what we don't know. We don't know exactly when it was painted. Probably sometime in the 1490s, based on tree ring dating of the oak panels and stylistic parallels to Bosch's other work. We don't know for certain who commissioned it or where it originally hung. The triptych format suggests it was meant to be an altarpiece, but the sheer sensuality of the central panel makes a church setting hard to believe. And most importantly, we don't know what Bosch was actually trying to say. Some scholars read it as one continuous story of the end times, from the creation of the world to humanity's destruction. Others argue the central panel is a utopian paradise of delights, where the artist's imagination runs free of all moral constraint. Still others insist it's a false paradise, a visual trap that seduces the viewer the same way the fruit inside it seduces the naked figures reaching for it. The one thing we know for sure, this painting resists any final interpretation. So let's at least go through it, door by door. The world before man. Closed, the triptych shows a monochrome grisaille, the earth sealed inside a glass sphere, floating in absolute emptiness. This is the third day of creation from the book of Genesis. The waters have been separated from the land. Plants have appeared, but there's no sun or moon yet. That's why Bosch strips these outer panels of color. Light hasn't been created yet. The world exists, but it isn't visible. In the upper left corner sits a tiny figure of God the Father, wearing a tiara that echoes the papal one. He sits far off at the very edge, and his gesture looks almost hesitant, as if the world he's created is already starting to slip out of his control. A Bible rests on his lap, as if he needs a script to finish the job. Two Latin inscriptions run across the doors, quoting Psalm 33. "For he spoke, and it was done. He commanded, and it appeared." Notice, this isn't a line from Genesis itself. It's a poetic retelling of creation from the Psalms of David. Bosch is quoting not the source, but an interpretation of it. Already on the closed doors, he's telling us, everything you're about to see inside is also an interpretation, his own. You open the triptych, and the monochrome silence explodes into color. The left wing, the Garden of Eden. In the foreground stand God, Adam, and Eve.
God, whose face is deliberately made to resemble Christ's, holds Eve by the wrist and presents her to Adam, who is just woken up. Adam sits wide-eyed, stunned by the beauty of the being that appeared while he was unconscious. This isn't the fall. There's no apple, no expulsion. Bosch is showing the moment theologians associated with the founding of marriage. God brings a woman to a man and blesses their union. But the snake is already there, coiled quietly around the trunk of a palm tree at the center of the panel, waiting for its moment.
Behind Eve, rabbits dart around, a traditional symbol of fertility. Nearby stands a dragon tree, which several scholars read as a symbol of eternal life. At the center of the panel rises a strange fountain of paradise, a pinkish organic structure bristling with tendrils, growing out of a shimmering blue lake. And right at its center, like the pupil of an eye, is a dark opening where an owl sits. In the medieval imagination, the owl is a bird of darkness, a symbol of sin and spiritual blindness. Its presence here is a warning. Sin is already inside paradise. The fountain is surrounded by exotic animals, giraffes, elephants, unicorns. Real and fantastical creatures sit side by side, completely indistinguishable. That's not an accident. It's a method. The horizon of the left panel flows straight into the central one. The landscape simply continues, as if we'd taken one step forward. But what happens here isn't a continuation of paradise. It's paradise perverted. Hundreds of naked figures, men and women, black and white, fill every inch of the surface. They eat giant fruit, climb inside seashells, ride birds bigger than horses. Strawberries and cherries the size of a human head get passed hand to hand, devoured with the eagerness of chicks in a nest. In 1605, Fray José de Sigüenza, librarian of the Escorial, gave this panel a description that stuck for centuries. Comparing it to another Bosch triptych, the haywain, he said that where the haywain speaks of futility through dry hay, the garden speaks of it through strawberries. A fruit that barely leaves a taste on your tongue, a pleasure gone the moment you swallow it. The whole central panel is a flavor that dissolves before it even reaches the palate. But the fruit here isn't just food. It's too big, too ripe, too fragile, held, passed around, bitten into, hidden inside, seemingly grown from human bodies. This isn't a harvest. It's the raw material of desire. And almost all of it is the kind of fruit that wrinkles, spoils, and rots fast. Pleasure here is built not to last. The same is true of the animals. They are not background or decoration. They are transport, partners, witnesses, sometimes almost extensions of the human body itself. Birds, fish, shellfish, unicorns, bows, all of nature gets pulled into the same current of desire. In this garden, man no longer rules over creation. He dissolves into it. At the center of the composition is a round pool full of bathing women. Around them, in a slow, counterclockwise circle, rides a procession of men on horses, camels, unicorns, griffins, bows. The scene echoes late medieval allegories of the 7 deadly sins, where each sin rides its own animal. Pride on a lion, lust on a pig, greed on a wolf. In the background, rising out of the water, stand 5 fantastical structures. The central one echoes the fountain of paradise from the left wing, but with one crucial difference. It's broken. Cracked open. Where an owl once sat in the fountain of Eden, naked bodies now swarm in openly carnal poses. Bosch moves from the sacred to the carnal with surgical precision. Even nature itself is off here. Birds swim in the water, fish crawl on land and fly through the air. The familiar shapes of the natural world are suspended in Bosch's imagined paradise, a world caught in permanent becoming, where the only thing missing is death. In one of the strangest corners of the panel, a man and a woman are sealed inside a transparent glass sphere, a fragile bubble separating their private world from the chaos outside. Bosch encases intimacy in glass, as if to warn us whatever feels protected can burst in an instant. And notice, there are no children in this garden. People emerge fully formed from fruit and eggshells, as if spared the pain of birth. Their doll-like bodies are so stripped of individuality that the art historian Hans Belting called them naked souls.
We're looking at a humanity we don't recognize, a utopia that never existed. But one figure breaks from the collective madness. In the lower right corner, behind a huge glass vessel, sits a blonde woman, her head propped on one hand in a gesture of melancholy, lips pressed shut. In her other hand, an untouched apple. Beside her stands a man, the only clothed figure in the entire panel, looking straight at the viewer, pointing at her like a silent narrator. However you read this scene, it cracks the flawless surface of the story, because this is where consciousness appears, the awareness of good and evil that, according to the Bible, didn't exist before the fall. The right-hand door comes down like a blow. Daylight fades. Nature disappears. All that's left is civilization turned against itself. Burning cities reflect in black water. Columns of refugees move through the night along the roads, while enemy armies close in on the next city to set it ablaze. Bosch paints this with the realism of someone who's actually seen it. Fires like these really did burn through his world. This section is sometimes called the musical hell, for all the instruments turned into instruments of torture. Lute, harp, bagpipes, everything that once brought pleasure is now used to punish those who devoted their lives to worldly music. Pleasure becomes torment. Music becomes punishment. The world is turned completely upside down. And here's one of the most talked about details in the whole triptych. On the buttocks of a sinner, sprawled near the choir of the damned, Bosch painted actual musical notation. Modern musicians have transcribed and played it, and it genuinely works as music. Maybe the darkest musical score in history, written directly onto human flesh. Next to the musicians is a gaming table, where a gambler is pinned down, having lost his entire fortune. A beast-like demon strangles him while holding up a shield, with a severed hand balancing a die on 2 fingers. The dice have been thrown. The game is over. A little further on, the envious sit frozen in icy water, a punishment that mirrors the coldness of their own hearts. Higher up the panel, 2 enormous severed ears, pierced by a blade, roll forward, crushing everything in their path. Ears, meant for hearing, turned into blind instruments of destruction. Another inversion, in a world where every sense has turned against the person it belonged to. At the center of the panel rises one of the strangest figures in the history of painting, the Tree Man. His body is a hollowed-out tree trunk, balanced on 2 boats. Inside it is a tavern where half-naked people sit waiting for demons to serve them toads and other foul creatures. On his head sits a flat disc holding a bagpipe. His face, thin,
wry, glancing sideways, is thought by many scholars to be a self-portrait of Bosch himself. The artist placed himself inside hell, not as a sinner, but as an observer, someone looking out at you from the center of a nightmare, silently asking, "Do you recognize me now?" Below him sits the prince of the underworld, a bird-headed monster swallowing sinners and vomiting them straight back out. And in the very bottom right corner, a pig in a nun's veil kisses a naked man, pressuring him to sign away his property to the church, while a demon notary stands ready with the seal. This isn't just a punishment scene, it's a direct accusation aimed at the clergy. What does it all mean? Here's the problem. In 500 years, no single scholar has come up with an answer everyone else can agree on. Falkenberg argues the triptych as a whole traces humanity's fate, with the central panel as a false paradise designed to deceive the senses. Vandenbroek reads it as a literal, carnal take on the biblical command to be fruitful and multiply. Belting sees the central panel as a utopia, the world as it might have looked if the fall had never happened. Margaret Sullivan proposes the whole triptych is the Antichrist's dream, steering the world toward destruction from the start. And Meinhard Michael suggests the central panel is the dream of the woman in the lower right corner, who wakes to realize the full horror of her own sins. As Falkenberg put it, Bosch's forms don't hold a fixed meaning. They're anchors the chains of association. Associations that are always at risk of breaking apart under the very act of interpretation they invite. He calls them fallen images. Fallen in the sense that Satan fell. Maybe that's Bosch's genius. He built a work that can never be closed. Not physically, the doors do shut, but intellectually, interpretively, this triptych stays open forever. Every viewer walks into the labyrinth, and every one of them comes out with a different story. Antonio de Beatis ran out of words.
Fray José de Sigüenza found strawberries. Falkenberg found a broken mirror. Belting found utopia. Sullivan found the Antichrist's dream. Michael found a woman waking up inside her own nightmare. You'll find something too, but it will be yours. If you're interested in the hidden meanings behind paintings, subscribe. See you next time.